The great moon ascent happened only once every century, and tonight, the ballroom of the Northern Reach Palace blazed with 1,000 silver candles that made the marble floors look like frozen starlight. Lillian pressed herself against the velvet curtain in the farthest corner of the grand hall, willing herself to disappear. Her fingers twisted the rough fabric of her plain gray dress, the kind servants wore, the kind that screamed invisible. Around her, wolves in silk and diamonds laughed, their voices sharp and bright. Alphas prowled through the crowd with chests puffed out. Betas glided between conversations like they belonged. Even the other Omegas held their heads high, their wolves humming beneath their skin like songs Lillian had forgotten how to sing. Her wolf had been silent for 12 years. Silent since the night her father's fists had taught her that smallness was survival. Just 2 more hours, she whispered to herself, watching the gilded clock above the dais. 2 more hours, and she could slip back to her tiny room above the palace kitchens. 2 more hours, and no one would even remember she'd been here. That's when the scent hit her. Pine. Smoke. Winter wind sharp enough to cut. And underneath it all, home. Lillian's knees buckled. Her breath strangled in her throat. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to get as far away as possible from whatever was making her heart slam against her ribs like a trapped bird. But she couldn't move. Because across the ballroom, through a sea of bodies that suddenly parted like water, stood King Fenris himself. The Iron Sovereign. The unbroken Alpha. The wolf who had ruled the Northern Reach for 300 years without ever bending, without ever breaking, without ever showing mercy to those who threatened his people. He was massive, 6.5 feet of raw, controlled power wrapped in midnight black formal attire that somehow made him look even more dangerous. His silver eyes swept across the crowd with the cold precision of a predator, and when they landed on her, they stopped. The entire ballroom fell silent. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching tale of forbidden love, power, and the courage it takes to choose yourself, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. Lillian watched in horror as Fenris's nostrils flared. As his pupils dilated until his eyes looked black. As his hands, those hands that had torn enemy wolves in half, began to tremble. No, she breathed. No, no, no. But the king was already moving. The crowd scattered before him like leaves before a storm. High Council members stumbled over themselves to get out of his path. Ancient alphas who had fought beside him in the blood wars pressed their backs to the walls, heads bowed in automatic submission. He crossed the ballroom in seconds that felt like centuries, and when he stopped in front of her, Lillian had to tilt her head back just to meet his eyes. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp jaw shadowed with stubble. A scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Lips that had probably never smiled, set in a face carved from stone and starlight. But it was his scent that destroyed her, that pine and smoke and home that made every broken piece of her soul scream mate, mate. I've been waiting 3 centuries for you, Fenris said, and his voice was gravel and silk, command and plea. His hand lifted slowly, like he was afraid she might shatter. My queen. My. Don't. The word ripped from Lillian's throat before she could stop it. Fenris froze. His hand hung in the air between them, and she watched something flicker across his face, confusion, then pain so raw it made her chest ache. You're my fated mate, he said, quieter now, like he was explaining something simple to a child. The moon goddess herself. I know what I am, Lillian interrupted, and she hated how her voice shook. Hated how every instinct screamed at her to close the distance, to let him touch her, to give in to the bond that was already trying to wrap around her heart like chains made of starlight. The High Council had gone deathly still. Lillian could feel hundreds of eyes on her back, could practically hear their thoughts. Who is she? How dare she? Doesn't she know what he is? Fenris's jaw tightened. His hand slowly lowered to his side, curling into a fist. Then you know, he said carefully, that this bond cannot be denied. That we were made for each other. That you want a queen, Lillian said, and something inside her cracked open. Not a person. Not a choice. Just someone who fits the role. His silver eyes widened. That's not. You don't even know my name. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Fenris opened his mouth. Closed it. And Lillian watched the most powerful alpha in existence realize she was right. He started. But Lillian was already moving. She ducked under his arm, ignoring how her entire body screamed in protest at putting distance between them. Ignored how her silent wolf suddenly stirred for the first time in 12 years, whimpering and clawing to get back to him. Wait, Fenris turned, his hand reaching for her again. Lillian spun to face him one last time. The king of the Northern Reach, surrounded by his council, his people, his power, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And that's exactly why she had to run. No, she said clearly, so everyone could hear. So there could be no mistake. I reject this bond. I reject this claim. She watched Fenris's face go pale. Watched him stagger backward like she'd driven a blade between his ribs. Watched his silver eyes flash gold as his wolf surged forward, only to be forced back down by pure, brutal willpower. You can't, his voice broke. Actually broke. Please. You don't understand what this will. But Lillian was already running. She pushed through the crowd, past shocked faces and gasping whispers, and she didn't stop until she burst through the palace doors into the freezing night air. Behind her, she heard a sound that would haunt her forever. The Alpha King, the Iron Sovereign, the Unbroken. Falling to his knees. And the earth itself trembling beneath his anguish. Lillian didn't remember how she made it back to her room. One moment she was running through the palace corridors, her lungs burning and her heart trying to claw its way out of her chest. The next, she was collapsed against her door, sliding down until she hit the cold wooden floor of the cramped space above the kitchens that had been her sanctuary for 3 years. What have I done? Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against the floor. Through the thin walls, she could hear the kitchen staff whispering frantically, their voices carrying up through the heating vents. The king actually fell. Never seen anything like it. Who does she think she is? Lillian pressed her palms over her ears, but she couldn't block out the truth. She had just publicly rejected the most powerful alpha in existence. The man destined to be her mate. The wolf who could snap her in half with a single thought. Except he hadn't. Even as she'd said no, even as she'd humiliated him in front of his entire court, Fenris hadn't used his alpha command. Hadn't forced her wolf to submit. Hadn't done any of the things that alphas did when omegas stepped out of line. He just knelt. Like she'd broken something inside him that couldn't be fixed. Stop it, Lillian whispered to herself, digging her nails into her palms until it hurt. Stop feeling guilty. You did the right thing. You did the only thing. Her tiny room looked even smaller now, just a narrow bed, a wooden chest that held everything she owned, and a single window that overlooked the servants' courtyard. This was her life. Small. Quiet. Safe. Safe. She'd built this carefully, brick by brick, over 3 years of keeping her head down and her wolf suppressed. After she'd run from her father's pack at 18, after she'd spent 2 years wandering the territories as a rogue, nearly starving, nearly dying, the Northern Reach had taken her in. They'd given her work. A roof. A chance to disappear into the background. And now she'd gone and made herself the most visible person in the entire kingdom. A soft knock at her door made Lillian's heart stop. Lil? It's me. She sagged with relief. Come in, May. The door creaked open, and Maeve slipped inside, a small beta woman with wild red curls and flour still dusting her apron. She'd been the first person to show Lillian kindness when she'd arrived at the palace, half dead and completely broken. The head baker who'd taught her to make bread and never once asked about the scars. Sweet moon above, girl, Maeve breathed, shutting the door behind her. Are you trying to get yourself killed? I didn't mean, Lillian's voice cracked. I didn't know he would. Didn't know the king would recognize his fated mate at the moon ascent? Maeve crossed her arms, but her brown eyes were worried, not angry. Lil, the whole palace has been buzzing about it for weeks. The seers predicted he'd find his queen tonight. Lillian's stomach dropped. Everyone knew? Everyone hoped. Maeve sat down beside her on the floor, something she'd done 100 times over the years when Lillian couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't remember how to be anything but afraid. The king has been different lately. Distracted. The darkness at the borders is getting worse, and the council's been pressuring him to find a mate, to secure the bloodline, to save the kingdom with some magical bond, Lillian finished bitterly. That's exactly why I said no, May. He doesn't want me. He wants a solution. Maeve was quiet for a long moment. Then, gently, did you see his face when you rejected him? Lillian closed her eyes, but she could still see it. The way Fenris's expression had shattered. The way his massive frame had trembled. The way he'd looked at her like she was the sun, and she'd just chosen to set forever. He's the Alpha King, Lillian whispered. He's probably rejected dozens of women. He'll get over it. Lil. Maeve's voice went very soft. Honey, the king has never taken a lover. In 300 years. The palace records are very clear about that. He's been waiting for his true mate since the day he took the throne. The words hit Lillian like a physical blow. 300 years. Alone. Waiting. For her. I can't, Lillian said, and she hated how her voice broke. May, you don't understand. My wolf is broken. I'm broken. What happens when he realizes that the moon goddess made a mistake? What happens when I can't be the queen he needs, can't give him the power or the heirs or the... What if he doesn't care about any of that? Lillian laughed, but it sounded like crying. Alphas always care. Maeve squeezed her hand. Your father cared about control. The king. Lil, I've worked in this palace for 40 years. I've seen him rule through wars and plagues and political nightmares that would have destroyed lesser wolves. And you know what I've never seen? Him be cruel. Him take what wasn't freely given. Him use his power to hurt someone weaker. Then he'll be the first alpha to resent an omega who can't shift, Lillian said quietly. And I'd rather live with my choice than watch him learn to hate me. Maeve looked at her for a long moment, and Lillian could see the argument forming, could see her friend trying to find the right words to make her understand. But before she could speak, a deep, resonant gong echoed through the palace. Then another. And another. Maeve's face went white. Oh no. What? Lillian scrambled to her feet. What is that? The king's summons. Maeve stood slowly, her hands twisting in her apron. He's calling an emergency council. He's never done that before, not in all my years here. Through the window, Lillian could see lights blazing to life all across the palace. Wolves were running through the courtyard, their faces tight with worry. And somewhere deep in the castle, she could feel it, a pull so strong it made her knees weak. A bond trying desperately to complete itself, reaching across the distance like a dying star. He's going to order me to accept, Lillian whispered. But Maeve shook her head, her expression strange. No, honey. I don't think that's what he's going to do at all. Lillian had never been inside the council chamber. Servants didn't belong in the heart of the palace, in the towering room where silver-veined marble columns stretched up to a domed ceiling painted with the phases of the moon. Where the most powerful wolves in the northern reach sat in a circle of ancient stone thrones, deciding the fate of thousands. But the guards had come for her anyway. They'd been respectful, two female warriors who'd escorted her through hallways she'd only ever cleaned, past tapestries she'd only ever dusted. They hadn't touched her, hadn't spoken, but their presence had made it clear, this wasn't a request. Now she stood in the center of the chamber, feeling like a mouse dropped into a den of lions. The High Council sat in their thrones, 12 alphas and betas whose combined age probably totaled 3,000 years. Lord Arvid, the military commander with a face like weathered granite. Lady Haley, the diplomatic envoy whose silver tongue had ended wars. Chancellor Lawrence, whose dark eyes were currently studying Lillian like she was a particularly interesting insect. And at the head of the circle, on a throne carved from black obsidian, sat King Fenris. He looked worse than he had in the ballroom. His formal jacket was gone, leaving him in just a white shirt that made the pallor of his skin even more obvious. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly the stone had actually cracked under his fingers. But when he looked at her, his silver eyes were gentle. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Lillian almost laughed. Like she'd had a choice. "Your Majesty." She watched him flinch at the formal title, saw his jaw tighten, but he didn't correct her. "The council," Fenris began, his voice carefully controlled, "has requested this emergency session to address the situation." Situation? Lord Arvid's voice boomed across the chamber. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, this is a crisis. You identified your fated mate and she rejected the bond. Do you understand what that means?" Fenris's eyes flashed gold. "I'm aware." "Are you?" Lady Haley leaned forward, her expression concerned rather than angry. "My king, an incomplete mate bond doesn't just cause emotional pain. It destabilizes your power. The darkness at our borders is already testing our defenses. If your strength fails..." "It won't," Fenris said flatly. "It already is," Chancellor Lawrence interrupted, gesturing to a silver mirror that suddenly blazed to life on the wall. Images flickered across its surface, the northern border, where the tree line had gone black and twisted. Where shadows moved that shouldn't exist in the natural world. "The corruption has spread another mile since the moon ascent. Since your bond was rejected." Lillian's breath caught. She could see it now, the way Fenris was holding himself too still. The way power flickered around him like a candle flame in the wind, unstable and unpredictable. This was her fault. "The solution is simple," Lord Arvid declared. "Use your Alpha command. Order the girl to accept the bond. For the good of the kingdom." "No." The word cracked across the chamber like thunder. Fenris rose from his throne, and suddenly he didn't look weak at all. He looked like the Alpha King who had ruled for 3 centuries, who had crushed rebellions and destroyed armies and never, ever bent. "I will not," he said, each word precisely cut, "force my mate to accept me. Not with a command. Not with pressure. Not even to save my own life." "Then you'll die," Arvid said bluntly. "And the kingdom dies with you." "So be it." The silence that followed was deafening. Lillian stared at Fenris, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was going to let himself die. Going to let the darkness consume his kingdom. All because she'd said no. He's insane, she thought wildly. He's absolutely. However, Fenris continued, turning those devastating silver eyes on her, "I have a proposal." Lillian's mouth went dry. 30 days, Fenris said quietly, speaking directly to her now, ignoring the council completely. "Live in the palace. Not as my mate, as my guest. I won't touch you. I won't command you. I won't even ask you to accept the bond. Then what's the point? Chancellor Lawrence demanded. Fenris didn't look away from Lillian. The point is choice. Real choice. I want 30 days to show you that I don't want a queen, I want you. Whatever that means. Broken wolf or not. Silent or screaming. I want the chance to prove that this bond isn't a cage. And if she still says no? Lady Haley asked softly. Fenris's expression cracked, just for a moment, showing the pain underneath. Then I'll respect her decision. And we'll find another way to save the kingdom. There is no other way, Arvid started. Then I'll die knowing I honored my mate's will, Fenris said simply. He turned back to Lillian, and she could see him trembling. Could see the effort it took to stand there, to not fall to his knees again, to not beg. 30 days, Lillian. That's all I'm asking. He knew her name. Somewhere between the ballroom and now, he'd learned her name. This is ridiculous, Arvid snarled. This is his right, Lady Haley cut him off. The king has proposed a courtship. Ancient law allows it. Ancient law, Lawrence said dryly, was written when mates didn't reject each other. Lillian's mind was racing. 30 days in the palace. 30 days of being watched, judged, pressured. 30 days of fighting a bond that was already trying to strangle her heart. But also 30 days to prove she was right. That he wanted the idea of her, not the reality. That when he saw how broken she really was, he'd be relieved when she left. If I agree, Lillian said slowly, I stay in my own room. Above the kitchens. You'll have a suite in the royal wing, Arvid began. My room, Lillian repeated firmly. Or no deal. Fenris's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Your room. And I keep working in the kitchens. If you wish. And at the end of 30 days, if I still say no. I let you go, Fenris said, and the words clearly cost him. No commands. No tricks. No persuasion from the council. You walk away free. Lillian studied his face, looking for the lie, for the trap. But all she saw was hope. Desperate, terrifying hope. Fine, she whispered. 30 days. And watched the Alpha King's face transform with relief so profound it made her chest ache. Day 1 started with flowers. Lillian woke to find her tiny room absolutely buried in white roses, on her windowsill, her chest, her bed, even carefully arranged on the floor so she could still walk. The scent was overwhelming, beautiful and suffocating all at once. A small card rested on her pillow in handwriting so precise it looked like calligraphy. White roses mean new beginnings. I thought we could use one. She should have been annoyed. Instead, she found herself pressing the card to her chest, hating how her broken wolf stirred at even this small piece of him. Get yourself together, she muttered, shoving the card in her pocket. The kitchen was chaos when she arrived, maid directing 3 new apprentices while simultaneously managing preparations for a state dinner. But the moment Lillian walked in, the entire room went silent. What? Lillian asked, tying on her apron. You're still working? A young beta named Tomas gaped at her. But you're the king's guest, Lillian cut him off firmly. I'm the king's guest. For 30 days. And I'm still a kitchen servant. Maeve smiled, relief flooding her face. Thank the moon. I thought I'd lost my best bread maker. We have 200 dinner rolls that need. I'll start immediately, Lillian said gratefully, diving into the familiar comfort of flour and yeast and work that didn't require thinking about impossible Alpha Kings. She made it exactly 2 hours before he appeared. Lillian looked up from kneading dough to find King Fenris standing in the kitchen doorway, looking absurdly out of place in his formal black coat among the wooden tables and hanging copper pots. The entire kitchen staff immediately dropped into deep bows. Your Majesty, Maeve stammered. We weren't expecting, the kitchens aren't usually. I'm here to see Lillian, Fenris said quietly, his silver eyes finding her across the room. Every head swiveled to stare at her. Lillian wanted to disappear into the floor. I'm working. I can see that. Fenris moved closer, and she watched the kitchen staff scatter like frightened birds, suddenly remembering urgent tasks in the far corners of the room. I thought perhaps you'd join me for lunch. I eat in the kitchens. Then I'll eat here too. Lillian's hand stilled in the dough. You're the king. You can't just. Can't I? Fenris pulled out a wooden stool, the same kind the apprentices used, and sat down across from her work table. The ancient wood creaked under his weight. I seem to recall the Northern Reach having very few rules about where the king takes his meals. Maeve made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh. Lillian glared at him. You're being ridiculous. I'm being present, Fenris corrected gently. There's a difference. And then, to her complete shock, he just sat there. Watching her work. Not demanding conversation. Not trying to touch her. Just existing in her space with a patience that should have been impossible for an alpha of his power. After 10 minutes of silence, Lillian couldn't take it anymore. Don't you have a kingdom to run? I do. I've scheduled meetings around lunch from now on. For 30 days? For as long as it takes. Lillian punched down the dough harder than necessary. This is a waste of your time. Is it? Fenris tilted his head, studying her with those devastating silver eyes. Because right now, watching you create something from nothing, seeing the way your hands move with such certainty, I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. Her traitorous heart skipped a beat. You're good at this, Lillian said instead, focusing fiercely on the dough. At saying pretty words. I'm not trying to be pretty. I'm trying to be honest. Fenris leaned forward slightly. Ask me something. Anything. Let me prove I want to know you. Lillian hesitated, then, why haven't you taken a lover in 300 years? She'd meant to shock him, to make him uncomfortable. But Fenris just smiled, a real smile this time, small and sad and achingly genuine. Because I knew you were out there, he said simply. And giving myself to anyone else would have felt like a betrayal of the person I was meant to find. Even when I didn't know your name. Even when I thought I might wait forever. The dough blurred in front of Lillian's eyes. She swallowed hard. That's insane. Perhaps. Fenris's voice went softer. But 300 years is a long time to be lonely, Lillian. When I scented you last night, when I finally found you after centuries of searching, it wasn't relief I felt. It was recognition. Like every good thing I'd ever done, every hard choice, every moment of patience had led me exactly where I needed to be. Stop, Lillian whispered, because her broken wolf was howling now, clawing at her chest, begging her to close the distance between them. Fenris immediately pulled back. I'm sorry. Too much? Yes. No. I don't. Lillian pressed her hands flat on the table, fighting for control. You don't know me. You don't know what's wrong with me. Then tell me. My wolf hasn't spoken in 12 years, Lillian blurted out. She's silent. Broken. I can't shift, I can't feel pack bonds, I can barely sense other wolves. That's what you're getting if you complete this bond, a defective Omega who will never be able to give you the power or the connection or the... Lillian. Fenris's hand moved across the table, stopping just inches from hers. Not touching. Asking permission. May I? She should say no. Should maintain the distance. Should protect herself. But she nodded. His fingers closed over hers, warm and calloused and gentle, and the bond between them sang. Lillian gasped at the rush of sensation, his strength, his steadiness, his absolute certainty that she was exactly what he needed. And underneath it all, something else. Something that made her broken wolf lift her head for the first time in over a decade. Pain. Not from the bond. From him. From the darkness eating at his power, growing stronger every hour the bond remained incomplete. "You're dying," Lillian breathed, horror flooding through her. "I'm waiting," Fenris corrected softly. "There's a difference." Day 14 arrived with blood. Lillian woke to chaos, alarm bells screaming through the palace, wolves running through the corridors, and a scent in the air that made her broken wolf finally speak for the first time in 12 years. Mate. Hurt. Mate hurt. She was running before she even registered the decision, her bare feet slapping against cold stone as she followed the pull of the bond. Downstairs, through hallways, past guards who tried to stop her until they saw her eyes and stepped aside. The infirmary doors were already open. Fenris sat on an examination table, his shirt torn and bloodied, while the royal healer, an ancient wolf named Mora, pressed silver instruments against a wound on his shoulder that looked like something had clawed into him. "What happened?" Lillian demanded, pushing past Lord Arvid and 2 other council members. Fenris's head snapped up, his silver eyes widening. "Lillian, you shouldn't." "What happened?" "Border Patrol," Mora said grimly, not looking up from her work. The darkness manifested physical forms this time. "Shadow wolves. They got past our defenses." "Because the king's power is failing," Arvid added, his voice tight with accusation. Lillian felt something crack open in her chest. This was her fault. All of it. Fenris was out there fighting monsters while his strength deteriorated because she was too afraid to. "Don't," Fenris said quietly, and she realized he was watching her face. "Don't do that to yourself. This isn't your fault." "Isn't it?" Lillian moved closer despite herself. "You're dying because I rejected the bond. I'm fighting because it's my duty." Fenris winced as Mora cleaned the wound. "The bond situation is complicated, but the darkness would be there regardless." "Except you'd be strong enough to fight it," Lillian whispered. Fenris reached for her hand, then stopped himself, still respecting her boundaries even now, even injured. "Lillian." "Everyone out," Lillian said suddenly. Arvid sputtered. "Excuse me?" "I said everyone out. Now." She turned to face the council members, and for the first time in her life, Lillian let her wolf rise to her eyes. Let them see she was done being invisible. "The king and I need to talk. Privately." Mora looked between them, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes. Then I finish treating that wound." The room cleared in seconds. The moment the door closed, Lillian turned on Fenris. "Show me." "Show you what?" "The truth. Not the pretty words or the careful control. Show me what this bond rejection is actually doing to you." Fenris's jaw tightened. "I don't want to manipulate you." "You're not," Lillian cut him off. "I'm asking. So show me." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Iron Sovereign let his walls fall. The change was instantaneous and devastating. Fenris's hands started trembling. His silver eyes flickered between human and wolf, unable to settle. His breathing turned ragged, and Lillian could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the room. But worst of all was the bond itself. Without his careful control hiding it, Lillian could feel everything. The way it was tearing him apart from the inside. The way his wolf was literally eating at his own power, driven mad by the incomplete connection. The way every breath was agony, every heartbeat a battle, every moment without her acceptance another step toward complete collapse. Moon above, Lillian breathed, her own hands shaking now. Fenris, how are you even standing? Practice, he said through gritted teeth. 3 centuries of learning to endure. This isn't endurance, this is torture. Lillian moved closer without thinking, her hand rising toward his face. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? Because it's not your burden to carry. Fenris leaned into her touch despite himself, his eyes closing briefly. I meant what I said, Lillian. I won't force you. Not even with guilt. You stubborn, impossible, Lillian's voice cracked. You're literally dying and you're still giving me a choice? Always. His eyes opened, burning with intensity. Because that's what you deserve. What every Omega deserves. What every person deserves, the right to choose their own fate, even if it kills me to honor it. And that's when Lillian finally understood. This wasn't about the bond. It wasn't about duty or destiny or what the moon goddess intended. It was about a male who had spent 300 years learning that real strength meant knowing when to bend. Who ruled absolutely but refused to command the one person he wanted most. Who would rather die than become the kind of alpha that had taught her to fear touch. He was nothing like her father. Nothing at all. I have to tell you something, Lillian whispered. About why my wolf went silent. Fenris went very still. You don't have to. I want to. She took a shaky breath. My father was an alpha. A traditional one. He believed Omegas existed to serve, to submit, to be broken into obedience. When I was 13 and my wolf first emerged strong and opinionated, he decided to teach me a lesson. She watched Fenris's expression darken, saw his hands curl into fists. He beat me until my wolf retreated so deep I couldn't find her anymore, Lillian continued, the words spilling out like poison she'd held too long. And when I finally ran at 18, I swore I'd never let an alpha control me again. That I'd rather die alone than become someone's possession. Lillian, Fenris's voice was rough with barely contained fury. But you're not him, she said, and felt her wolf stir stronger now, recognizing safety. You're not any of the things I was afraid you'd be. And I think, she laughed wetly. I think I've been falling for you since day one. Since you sat in my kitchen and just existed beside me. Since you respected every boundary even when it was killing you. Fenris's breathing had gone ragged again, but this time for a completely different reason. What are you saying? Lillian stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel his warmth. I'm saying I need more than 30 days. His face fell. Oh. I need forever. Fenris froze. His silver eyes went wide, hope and disbelief warring across his features. Lillian, if this is because you feel guilty. She kissed him. The kiss lasted exactly 3 seconds before the infirmary door exploded inward. Lillian jerked back from Fenris, her heart hammering, as 5 council members burst into the room with expressions ranging from relieved to horrified. But it was the figure behind them that made Fenris surge to his feet despite his injury. A messenger, covered in dirt and blood, collapsed to one knee. Your Majesty, the messenger gasped. The Southern Pack. They've taken hostages. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Explain, Fenris commanded, and for the first time, Lillian heard the true Alpha King, cold, controlled, absolutely lethal. Alpha Gareth crossed our border 3 hours ago with 200 warriors. The messenger's voice shook. He's demanding an audience. He says, the messenger's eyes flicked to Lillian. He says he knows about your embonded mate. And he has leverage. Lord Arvid swore viciously. How many hostages? 15. Kitchen staff who were gathering supplies from the border village. Lillian's blood turned to ice. Maeve. Where's Maeve? The messenger's silence was answer enough. No, Lillian breathed. No. Fenris caught her before her legs gave out, his strong arms wrapping around her despite the pain it must have caused his injury. "We'll get her back. I swear to you, we'll." "Alpha Gareth requests you come alone, Your Majesty," the messenger continued. "To the neutral ground at moonrise. If you bring warriors, he'll kill the hostages. If you don't come..." The messenger swallowed hard. "He'll kill them anyway." Slowly. "It's a trap," Chancellor Lawrence said immediately. "He knows you're weakened. He's going to challenge you for the throne." "Let him try," Fenris growled. "You can barely stand." Lady Haley stepped forward, her expression desperate. "My king, you fought shadow wolves this morning. You're bleeding. Your power is unstable. If you face Gareth now..." "Then I face him," Fenris said flatly. "I don't abandon my people." "You'll die," Arvid said bluntly. "And then Gareth takes the northern reach, and everyone dies anyway." Lillian pulled back from Fenris's embrace, her mind racing. Maeve, who had shown her kindness when no one else would. Maeve, who had held her through nightmares and taught her to bake and never once judged her for being broken. Maeve, who was going to die because Lillian had been too afraid to accept a bond. "There's another option," Lillian said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. "No," Fenris said immediately, reading her intention in her eyes. "Absolutely not. If we complete the bond right now, your power stabilizes," Lillian continued, her voice steady even though she was shaking inside. "You'd be strong enough to face Gareth. Strong enough to save them. I won't let you sacrifice yourself out of guilt." "This isn't guilt." Lillian grabbed his hand, holding tight. "Fenris, I meant what I said. I want forever with you. But we don't have time for slow and gentle anymore. Maeve is going to die if we don't." "She's right," Lawrence interrupted grimly. "A completed bond would restore the king's full strength immediately. It's the only way he survives a confrontation with Gareth." "I don't care," Fenris snarled, his eyes flashing gold. "I'm not completing the most sacred bond of our kind because of a hostage situation. Lillian deserves better than..." "What I deserve," Lillian cut him off, "is the choice to save my friend. You gave me the right to choose my fate, remember? So I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing now." Fenris looked at her like she was tearing his heart out. "Not like this. Please, Lillian. Not because you're being forced. You're not forcing me." She stepped closer, cupping his face in her hands. "Gareth is. The darkness is. But you? You're just the male I'm choosing to stand beside while I fight back." For a moment, she thought he might refuse anyway. Might cling to his principles even if it meant losing everything. Then his shoulders sagged, and Lillian saw the exact moment the Alpha King realized he was trapped between two impossible choices. "If we do this," Fenris said hoarsely, "we do it right. Not a rushed claiming in an infirmary. You deserve..." "We don't have time," Arvid interrupted, checking his pocket watch. "Moonrise is in 4 hours. The bonding ritual alone takes 2, and then the king needs at least an hour for his power to fully stabilize." "Then we start now," Lillian said firmly. Fenris's hands were shaking as he pulled her closer. "Lillian, once we do this, there's no going back. The bond is permanent. Forever. And I need you to be absolutely certain that this is what you..." "I'm certain," Lillian whispered. "I'm terrified and uncertain about 1,000 other things, but not about you. Never about you." Something in Fenris's expression cracked open, relief and grief and love so profound it made her chest ache. "Everyone out," he commanded, his alpha voice rolling through the room. "Now." The council scattered. The moment they were alone, Fenris pressed his forehead to hers. "I wanted to court you properly. Wanted to give you time and space and every beautiful thing you deserved. I wanted. I know, Lillian said softly. But we'll have forever for beautiful things. Right now, I need you to be strong enough to come back to me. Always, Fenris breathed. I will always come back to you. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and claiming, and Lillian felt her wolf finally, rise fully to meet his. Felt the bond snap into place like a key turning in a lock, like coming home after years of being lost. Power exploded through the room in a wave of silver light. And somewhere in the darkness, Alpha Gareth smiled, because his trap had just been sprung. The bond completed with the force of a lightning strike. Lillian gasped as power flooded through her, Fenris's strength, his memories, his 300 years of loneliness crashing into her mind like a tidal wave. But more than that, she felt her own wolf surge. After 12 years of silence, her wolf didn't just speak, she roared. And for the first time in over a decade, Lillian shifted. The transformation was instantaneous, effortless, like breathing after nearly drowning. One moment she was human, the next she stood on 4 legs, her fur the color of moonlight, her wolf finally, blessedly whole. Fenris stared at her, his silver eyes wide with wonder. You're beautiful, he breathed. Then he shifted too, a massive black wolf that made Lillian's wolf look tiny by comparison. But she didn't feel small. She felt complete. Their wolves circled each other once, twice, then touched noses in the ancient greeting of true mates. The bond solidified further, wrapping around them like chains made of starlight and steel, unbreakable and eternal. When they shifted back to human form, Fenris was steady on his feet for the first time in weeks. His wound had already healed. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air shimmer. How do you feel? Lillian asked, even though she could sense it through the bond, his strength restored, his wolf settled, his entire being humming with renewed vitality. Like I could tear the world apart, Fenris said honestly. Then his expression softened. Like I finally found the piece of my soul I didn't know was missing. Lillian opened her mouth to respond, but the bond suddenly screamed a warning. Fenris felt it too. His head snapped toward the window, his eyes flashing gold. Something's wrong. The door burst open again, this time it was Lady Haley, her face pale. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Gareth didn't wait for moonrise. What? Fenris was already moving, pulling on a fresh shirt that someone had left on a nearby chair. He's at the gates. Right now. With the hostages. Haley's voice shook. And he's brought an army. 500 wolves, maybe more. Lillian's blood ran cold. That's not a challenge. That's an invasion. It's a coup, Chancellor Lawrence said grimly, appearing behind Haley. He must have been planning this for months. He knew you'd find your mate at the moon ascent. He was waiting for the exact moment you'd be at your weakest. Except I'm not weak anymore, Fenris said quietly, and there was something dangerous in his voice. Something that reminded Lillian that he hadn't ruled for 3 centuries by being gentle. No, but he doesn't know that yet, Lawrence said. He thinks you just completed a rushed bond with an Omega who has a broken wolf. He thinks you're still vulnerable. Lillian flinched, but Fenris immediately took her hand. Through the bond, she felt his absolute certainty, you are not broken. You never were. Then we use that, Fenris said, his tactical mind already working. Arvid, mobilize the warriors but keep them hidden. Haley, I want evacuation protocols ready for the civilians. Lawrence, get me everything we know about Gareth's fighting style. And me? Lillian asked. Fenris turned to her, conflict warring in his eyes. You stay here. Safe. Behind the palace wards where I'm useless? Lillian pulled her hand free. No. Maeve is out there because of me. I'm not hiding. Lillian, you just shifted for the first time in 12 years. You don't know how to fight, how to use your wolf in combat. Then teach me. She stepped closer, lifting her chin. You have an hour before you face Gareth. Use it. Show me how to be the mate of an alpha king. Something fierce and proud blazed in Fenris's eyes. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. 30 minutes later, Lillian stood in the palace training yard, her wolf form bristling with nervous energy. Around her, Fenris had assembled his most trusted warriors, not to fight, but to teach. An Omega's strength isn't in physical power, Fenris explained, circling her in his own wolf form. It's in pack bonds. In connecting to the wolves around you and amplifying their abilities. I don't know how to do that, Lillian admitted through the bond. Yes, you do. You've been doing it your whole life, you just didn't realize it. Fenris nuzzled against her neck, and she felt the bond pulse between them. Why do you think Maeve's bread always rose perfectly after you joined the kitchen? Why the apprentices learned faster when you were teaching them? Your wolf was always reaching out, always helping, even when she was silent. Lillian had never thought about it that way. Now do it deliberately, Fenris instructed. Reach out to the warriors around us. Feel their wolves. And give them what they need. Lillian closed her eyes and let her wolf reach. It felt like stretching muscles she didn't know she had, like opening a door that had been locked for years. And suddenly, she could feel them, 50 warriors, their wolves pressing against her consciousness like puppies seeking warmth. Some were nervous. Some were eager. Some were exhausted from days of border patrol. Instinctively, Lillian sent what they needed, calm to the nervous ones, focus to the eager, energy to the tired. And watched in amazement as the warriors around her straightened, their eyes clearing, their wolves settling into perfect readiness. Moon above, Lord Arvid breathed. I've never felt anything like that. That's a true Omega, Lady Haley said with wonder. Not broken. Never broken. Just, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Fenris shifted back to human form, and the pride in his eyes made Lillian's heart soar. Gareth has 500 warriors, he said. But we have something he doesn't. What's that? Lillian asked. Fenris smiled, fierce and wild. We have a queen. Through the bond, Lillian felt his plan forming. Felt his absolute trust in her abilities. Felt his certainty that together, they could face anything. Let's go save our people, Lillian said. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. The neutral ground was a stretch of barren earth between the palace and the forest, lit by dozens of torches that cast dancing shadows across 500 hostile wolves. At their center stood Alpha Gareth, a massive brute with scarred arms and cruel eyes that gleamed with anticipation. At his feet, bound and gagged, knelt Maeve and 14 other kitchen staff, their faces bruised and terrified. Lillian's wolf snarled at the sight, but Fenris's steady presence through the bond kept her grounded. Patience. Trust the plan. They approached alone, just as Gareth had demanded. Fenris in his full royal regalia, looking every inch the Alpha King. Lillian beside him in a simple white dress that marked her as newly bonded, deliberately appearing fragile and uncertain. Gareth's laughter boomed across the field. The mighty Fenris, brought low by an Omega. Look at you, you can barely stand straight after that rushed bonding. Pathetic. Fenris said nothing, just kept walking with measured steps. Through the bond, Lillian felt him cataloging everything, enemy positions, weaknesses, the exact distance to the hostages. I'll make you a deal, Gareth called out. Surrender the throne peacefully, and I'll let your precious kitchen rats live. Refuse, and, he grabbed Maeve by her hair, forcing her head back. Well. You know what happens to those who defy an alpha. Lillian felt Fenris's fury spike through the bond, but his voice remained calm. You're making a mistake, Gareth. Am I? You're weak. Everyone can see it. That bond you just completed? It's with a broken Omega who can't even shift. You've tied yourself to dead weight. Gareth's eyes found Lillian, raking over her with contempt. Tell me, little Omega, how does it feel knowing you've destroyed the greatest Alpha King in history? This was the moment. The opening they'd planned for. Lillian let her face crumple. Let tears fill her eyes. Let her voice shake as she whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Gareth said with mock sympathy. But that's what Omegas do, isn't it? Break things without meaning to. It's in your nature to be weak. You're right, Lillian said, taking a stumbling step forward, away from Fenris. Playing the frightened, guilty mate perfectly. I am weak. I can't shift. My wolf is. And then she shifted. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Lillian became the moonlight wolf, her fur gleaming silver under the torchlight. Gasps rippled through Gareth's army. But Lillian didn't stop there. She opened the floodgates of her power and reached, not just to the 50 warriors Fenris had hidden in the shadows around the clearing, but to every wolf in the northern reach. Every guard on the palace walls. Every scout in the forest. Every citizen who had ever called Fenris their king. And she gave them everything. Strength flooded into tired warriors. Courage filled frightened hearts. Focus sharpened scattered thoughts. The pack bonds that had been fraying under the darkness and uncertainty suddenly blazed to life, stronger than they'd been in decades. Gareth's eyes went wide with shock. What, how? You assumed broken meant powerless, Fenris said, his voice cutting across the field like a blade. He shifted into his massive black wolf form, power radiating from him in waves that made the air crackle. You assumed an Omega without a voice couldn't sing. You assumed wrong. All around the clearing, Fenris's warriors emerged from the shadows, but they weren't alone. Hundreds more had answered Lillian's call. Pack members who had felt her power reach out and chose to stand with their king. Citizens who had armed themselves with whatever they could find. Even the kitchen staff who had evacuated now returned, unwilling to abandon their own. Gareth's 500 warriors suddenly looked very small. This is still 500 against, Gareth started. Against a unified pack with a true queen, Fenris finished. Your choice, Gareth. Surrender now, or learn why I've held this throne for 3 centuries. Through the bond, Lillian felt Fenris's wolf straining for violence, hungry to tear apart the male who had threatened their mate, their people, their home. But he held himself in check, giving Gareth one last chance. Gareth looked around at his army, seeing doubt creeping into their eyes. Seeing them feel Lillian's power washing over the battlefield, warm and welcoming, showing them what a real pack could be. You think I'm afraid of you? Gareth snarled. But his hand released Maeve's hair, his stance shifting defensive. I think you're afraid of irrelevance, Fenris said quietly. You saw an opportunity to claim power through force. But power claimed through fear never lasts. It crumbles the moment someone stronger comes along. And you think you're stronger? Gareth challenged. I don't think. I know. Fenris took a single step forward, and the earth trembled beneath his paws. I have something you'll never understand, a mate who chose me freely. Warriors who follow me willingly. A kingdom built on loyalty, not terror. That's real strength, Gareth. That's why you'll never win. For a long moment, silence stretched across the battlefield. Then, one by one, Gareth's warriors began to lower their heads. Not in submission to Fenris, but in rejection of Gareth's leadership. Lillian's power had shown them the difference between a tyrant and a true alpha. Traitors! Gareth roared, but his voice cracked with desperation. I'll kill you all. He lunged for Maeve, claws extending. Lillian was faster. She crossed the distance in a silver blur, her smaller wolf form slamming into Gareth with supernatural force amplified by every pack bond she held. They rolled across the ground in a tangle of fur and fury, and Lillian's teeth found his throat. She didn't kill him. She didn't need to. She just held him there, pinned and helpless, until Fenris's massive form loomed over them both. "It's over," Fenris said simply. And Gareth, the would-be conqueror, finally bowed his head in defeat. The darkness at the borders had retreated the moment she and Fenris completed their bond. The shadow wolves had dissolved like nightmares at dawn, and the twisted trees had slowly begun to heal. The seers said it would take years for the land to fully recover, but recovery had begun. That was enough. "You're up early," Fenris murmured, wrapping his arms around her from behind and pulling her against his chest. Even after 3 months, the simple comfort of his touch still made her heart skip. "Couldn't sleep," Lillian admitted, leaning into his warmth. "Too much excitement." Today was the official coronation, the ceremony that would formally recognize her as Queen of the Northern Reach. They delayed it deliberately, giving Lillian time to grow into her power, to learn what it meant to be an Omega Queen in a world that had forgotten such things existed. "Nervous?" Fenris asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Terrified," Lillian said honestly. Then smiled. "But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means I'm about to do something that matters." Through the bond, she felt his pride and love wash over her like sunlight. 3 months, and the bond still felt like magic, the way they could sense each other's emotions, share thoughts, exist in a connection so deep that Lillian sometimes forgot where she ended and Fenris began. "I have something for you," Fenris said, pulling back slightly. "A coronation gift." "You've already given me everything," Lillian protested, gesturing at the palace, the kingdom, the life she'd never imagined having. "Not everything." Fenris's smile turned mischievous. "Close your eyes." Lillian obeyed, her heart racing with curiosity. She heard footsteps, multiple sets, approaching from inside their chambers. Then Fenris said softly, "Open them." Standing in the doorway, grinning like she'd won the lottery, was Maeve. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Tomas and 6 other kitchen staff, all dressed in formal attire that marked them as palace advisors? Lillian gasped. "The Queen's Council," Fenris corrected. "I realized something after Gareth's attack. The High Council is full of warriors and politicians and ancient wolves who understand power. But they don't understand people, not the way you do. So I'm creating a new council. One that advises specifically on the needs of the common wolves, the servants, the ones who keep the kingdom running but never get heard." Maeve's eyes were shining. "He's asked me to lead it." "Me? Can you imagine?" Lillian's throat tightened with emotion. She looked at Fenris, who was watching her with that gentle expression that still made her weak in the knees. "You did this for me?" "I did this for us," Fenris corrected. "You showed me that real strength comes from connection, from lifting up the wolves others overlook. I want our reign to reflect that. Always." Lillian kissed him then, deep and grateful, not caring that they had an audience. When they finally pulled apart, Maeve was pretending to wipe away tears. "Stop being so perfect," Maeve complained. "You're making the rest of us look bad." The coronation ceremony was unlike anything Lillian had imagined. Traditional wolf coronations were all about displays of power, the new ruler proving their strength through combat, through dominance, through forcing submission from the pack. But Fenris had changed everything. Instead of combat, Lillian walked through the palace grounds and let every wolf who wanted to touch her hand, to feel her power, to forge a personal connection with their queen. Instead of forced submission, she offered freely given bonds, pact connections that strengthened both her and them. By the time she reached the throne room, Lillian was connected to over 3,000 wolves. She could feel each of them like stars in her constellation, their hopes, their fears, their absolute trust in her leadership. Lord Arvid placed the crown on her head, a delicate thing of silver and moonstone that felt lighter than air. Queen Lillian of the Northern Reach, he proclaimed. Omega of the Silver Moon. Heart of the pack. The throne room erupted in cheers. But the moment that mattered most came later, during the private celebration in the royal chambers. Fenris found her standing by the window again, still wearing her crown, watching the pack celebration that had spilled into the palace courtyards. Wolves danced and laughed, the joy flowing through the pack bonds like music. Having second thoughts? Fenris asked, joining her at the window. About being queen? Never. Lillian turned to face him, taking in the sight of her mate, this impossible alpha who had waited 300 years, who had given her the choice that saved her, who looked at her broken pieces and saw only beauty. But I've been thinking about something else. Oh? Fenris raised an eyebrow. You once told me that you wanted to court me properly. That you wanted to give me time and beautiful things. Lillian stepped closer, her fingers finding the buttons of his formal jacket. I think we've had enough time. Don't you? Fenris's eyes darkened with understanding, with want, with 3 months of patient restraint finally reaching its limit. Lillian. I want everything, she whispered against his lips. Every moment. Every touch. Every piece of forever we promised each other. Starting right now. Fenris growled low in his throat, and then he was lifting her, carrying her toward their bed with a gentleness that contradicted the hunger burning through their bond. I love you, he said, laying her down like she was something precious. I have loved you since the moment you looked at the Alpha King and said no. Since you showed me that real love requires real choice. And I love you, Lillian replied, pulling him down to her. The wolf who waited. The king who bent. The mate who taught me that being broken just meant I had room to grow into something stronger. Their wolves sang in harmony as they finally, completely, became one. Outside, the Northern Reach celebrated its queen. Inside, 2 souls who had been searching for centuries finally came home. And in the morning, when Lillian woke wrapped in Fenris's arms with sunlight streaming through the windows, her first thought wasn't fear or doubt or worry about being enough. It was simply, this. This is what happiness feels like. Her broken wolf, now whole and strong, hummed in agreement. Sometimes the greatest strength came from knowing when to say no. And sometimes it came from learning when to say yes. Thank you so much for watching, beautiful souls. I hope this story touched your heart the way it touched mine while writing it. If you enjoyed Lillian and Fenris's journey, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a good romance. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another emotional story. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought. Did you cry? Did you cheer? I want to hear it all. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve a love that lets you choose. See you in the next story.